Good morning. I'm Karen, and this is Jen. And I, as so often happens whenever anybody's praising the Nature Lab, I get to be the one who stands up here and takes credit for the work of literally hundreds of people. This has been an amazing journey, and I have to say I'm so honored to be here in present company. I cannot go to the September 11th museum. I can't bear it, and I really do want to go to it. But someday I'll get my nerve up and go. That's what an achievement, and I am so stunned with that great, wonderful art exhibit. I'm going to take my 14-year-old and get on the plane to The Hague. Um, it's really inspiring to be here. As you all know, you get into your workplace and you're worrying about the next project, and sometimes it's really great to take your head up and sort of see what else is going on. We work at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County, or as we like to call it, the NHM. If you haven't been there, I highly recommend that you come. And if you need more incentive, we're actually not going to show our video today. You're going to have to see it tomorrow night at the gala. But we're really very close, so please come by if you get a chance. So the Nature Lab is a labor that's really analogous in some ways to some of the other things that you've heard about, but also really different. It's an exhibit that we wanted to make into a hands-on experience with material that's really unfamiliar to most people. Those of us who live in cities, we survive by doing this. And I remember growing up, I grew up kind of out in the country, and then when I used to go to New York, I used to be able to tolerate about 2 hours. And when you live in a city, you learn to close your senses off. And naturalists do the opposite. And it turns out that Los Angeles is in the middle, it's one of the only megacities along with Tokyo that's in the middle of a biodiversity hotspot. Does anybody know what that is? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I have all these scientists who are telling me, this is really important, we have to do an exhibit on this, we've created this amazing garden, and we have to tell this story. And I said, what are you talking about? Biodiversity is a word that doesn't even mean anything. So one of the big things that we said we need to do is, well, we've got to come up with project goals that actually anyone can even understand and identify with, because the team, let alone our actual visitors, don't want to hear the word biodiversity, which means nothing to us. And so we want to figure out how to connect visitors, and how we came up with this phrase of put your nature eyes on, which really just means open your senses. And you're going to find that it's really extraordinary to do that. And here in Southern California, but really in any city, there's nature everywhere. And in Southern California, even more so. So the key goals did not come easily. We had the curse of knowledge, which those of you that work with museum curators of any kind, and the last speakers were mentioning this, with the curators think that things just speak for themselves. Well, everyone who's got the curse of knowledge thinks that it speaks for themselves, including dinosaur people and art people and everything like that. So it takes a really long time with a team to work through that. Another thing about this exhibit is it was on a limited budget, but it was on a really limited time frame. So our milestones were not normal milestones. We claimed that we were doing things in traditional, conceptual, schematic, DD, and final design. But as Patty and the other people from Lexington who are here will tell you, it wasn't really true. We were kind of doing everything at the same time. And poor Jennifer, the project manager, was struggling with that as well. But we had to. It's also a project that there's some themes that have emerged in the last couple of things. We needed to reach out to audiences in order to make sure that what we were talking about was actually something that was interesting and relevant to them. We needed to be true to this deep content, and of course, testing and mock-ups were just a huge thing that we needed to do. And I love the lasagna statement, although I think our lasagna sometimes was upside down, sometimes it was sideways. It was more like seismic lasagna. What I haven't heard either of the other speakers talk about is how visitors come to museums and what they want. Our visitors come as social groups. They come generally as multi-generational social groups, teachers and parents, teachers and chaperones, parents and kids, 3 or 4 generations of families that are looking for a Sunday activity. So we have to be really careful that what we're doing is not just a little peek, but actually is something that people can do together. I also haven't heard much about the many different modes of entry. There's obviously learning styles, but also, what attracts people, and you gotta be thinking about that. So these were all things that we were thinking about. And so what did the nature lab have to do, and what did it have to be? We were really thinking about, well, how do we make the nature lab into something that doesn't, when you hear the word lab, you think of 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? That isn't someplace you actually want to go. How might do something to you? So we said, well, if right, but if we made it like a real curator's office, it would look like a 19th century musty, dusty, icky place that you don't want to go either. So we said, well, where's the nicest place? What's the best memory everybody has if they've grown up in a only relatively dysfunctional family? And most of us said the family kitchen. So we said that's really our analogy. And then we said, we're used to dealing with things like Jennifer's last project with us was dinosaurs. Well, if you've got a long-necked dinosaur, you don't really have to worry about a centerpiece. You've got 3 T-Rexes. Everyone's going to go straight for those. But when you have mostly small things, it's really different. And so we looked at what the assets were that we really had, and then we figured out, okay, what we've got to invent out of these things is experiences, but also attraction. We've got to pull people to there. So we looked at every kind of precedent we could possibly find, and we said, this has to be as fun as X. It has to be as intimate as Y. It has to be, but really what we were doing is stealing from everyone and recombining. As I said, sometimes it was like seismic lasagna. So the way we think about exhibits is that they are fundamentally subtractive from the universe of everything that you can do. And they subtract based on the jobs you need to do, the things you need to have happen with the visitor, or it's very easy to say it's one way, like the messages that you need to get across. But really, we just say each section, each element has to do its job. So fundamentally, the organization of this is that we have this horrific space to work in. It's basically a giant hallway between the bathrooms, the outdoors, and the cafe, and the store. So everyone wants to go through it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 doors. And everybody's going through there, not coming there on purpose. In addition, I have the executive elevator right in the middle, and there was nothing we could do about it. We had to fight the space. So we said, and this was about indoor-outdoor LA, but we had a big, huge covered thing and then a fire lane. So instead of being able to have indoor-outdoor, like a real Los Angeles patio or Palm Springs, the classic indoor-outdoor architecture of Southern California, we had a lot of problems to solve. And so this is the organization that we came out with, and I think I'll just kind of walk you through there. So the first thing we needed to do was at every door and outside every door, we had to pull people in, and it couldn't be the same message. So we had to rewrite our introductory message over and over and over again, and come up with these taglines like LA's nature in real time that would make people say, "There's nature here? Yeah, there's real time? It's immediate?" And we needed everyone, the way that you do when you're in your mom's kitchen, to say, "This is my place. It's for me. I'm going to lie on it. I'm going to play it. I'm going to grab it. I know exactly what to do." And of course, kids lead, just like the previous speakers were talking about. But my best day in the nature lab was when this very intense mom came up to me, grabbed my arm, and said, "I thought this was a kids exhibit, but I like it too." That's what we're after. Because as a mom, we all know the worst thing in the world is when your kid wants to go for the 500 millionth time to the most boring location where there's something for them to do, but there's nothing for the adults to do. And we knew that we wanted, because it's really about these conversations and about inspiring people, we needed to tell stories. They need to be inspiring, and they need to be told in a way that is really inviting. It can't look like a book on a wall. Or if it does, at least maybe it's a graphic novel. And one of our advantages is that we have the evidence of the history of life on Earth, the specimens, but using them in a way, putting them at the disposal of visitors so that you can actually learn how to tell 2 different kinds of parrots apart and why it matters is really what it's all about. So we spend a lot of time trying to figure out, how do we not overwhelm people, but yet teach them how to use these specimens as the evidence, because that's what they can go and see. And invite visitors to get up close and personal. This is one of the coolest things. It is a live rattlesnake and a live gopher snake next to each other. Right? Rattlesnake, gopher snake. And it's stunning because most people are so afraid of rattlesnakes that they've never really even engaged with one. So they love that. And we have scientists sometimes. I couldn't make a space that they would always be in. We had to come up with a way of making a space that when the scientists are there, they could clear off and they could use their microscopes and project everything. But when they weren't there, visitors could do something else, looking at specimens and watching amazing videos and images of bugs from all around Los Angeles. So we have a sort of a motto at the Natural History Museum that sometimes we have to kind of go back to over and over and over again, which is that we use design in service of the visitor experience with the content. And that sounds great, but it means that you really got to get your content straight, and then you've got to walk your talk. And that means that everybody is working full time on that. I don't have a regular credit thing, but we worked with lots and lots of partners. The space and the furniture design, we collaborated with Gallagher and Associates, who were incredibly patient with us, who said that we were annoying and hard to work with and pushed them harder than anybody ever did. And afterwards, I think he was just being polite. Patrick said, "Thank you. We wouldn't have come up with that result if we weren't so pushy," but who knows? And we have a very close-in partner who is an information designer. We have gotten addicted to thinking about graphics as an asset, as a way of pulling people in, but also that information design is everything. If people know what's a headline, what's a main message, what's a smaller message, they can walk through and have a good time. And another word about this is for our visitors, at least. Some of our visitors are there in groups of adults, and they're having a great time. Others of our visitors are grandparents chasing their toddler grandchildren. And they need to be able to, get to one place or another and see what's going on and understand it and speak the words for, tell the kid what it's about and feel smart themselves. So the information design is really important. And also interactives. There are some things that you can say, there's some things you can show, but a lot of things that really taxonomists do and people do who are trying to understand nature is they're using their senses. And it's very hard for a non-expert to understand what to look at. So we used a lot of interactives to help people focus on what to look at, what features to see, what features to pay attention to. And luckily for me, I am not very good at telling birds apart. So I kept on the bird one going and saying, I still don't get it. I still don't get how to tell a finch from a sparrow. If you tell me it's sparrow size, it means nothing to me. So, we always had to be going back and forth. But the doing the touching, the feeling, and the moving was really critical. And then we never ones to do anything easy. We did custom artwork for every single story. And we worked with 20 artists, more or less. And the only way to do this, to come up with something integrated, was to mock everything up over and over and over again. And every one of these things was mocked up, and we actually gave over an entire classroom for months and months and months on end. And we had something that we thought was cool. We pulled visitors in and we had them try it. And it was just a very informal process that never ended. And as I said, for Jennifer in Lexington until like the day before it got installed, it was still being designed. We actually did a massive mock-up of the most complicated thing, which is what we call our communal tables, because we decided that these memory maps that are a great educational tool, to make them really integrated, we needed to show the real objects. So we integrated objects and graphics and interactives right into art stories. So these were mocked up, they were drawn in-house before we even commissioned the artists to do them. We figured out what they needed to do. And we mocked up our interactives so that they actually worked until just ad infinitum. And we often started, if they weren't ready for a visitor, we'd call people from our finance department, because they work for us, but they're our colleagues, but they certainly aren't, don't have preconceived knowledge. About nature. I can see you all are in budgeting season just like I am. So what this allowed us to do was to combine and juxtapose elements. In this slide, you see a scientist video, a graphic that's a fairly traditional graphic with very large-scale things. And then here you see a touchable specimen from, here's the live animals. It's two turtles, one that is pushing the other. This is the native species of turtle, and it's a little guy who's shy. And the other one is the pet that's being dumped in the waterways around Los Angeles, and probably your hometown too, the infamous red-eared slider that basically pushes out our native turtles. So, just by working, mocking up, and testing, we were able to create these integrated experiences that some people go to the video because they want to see a scientist. Some people go straight to the live animals, and some people want to touch them, and other people want to read. So pretty much every element has at least 2 or 3 ways in. And putting it all together was a very complicated process that happened at many, many layers. And so imagining, to keep going with that food metaphor, the whole meal, and then each part of it and how they all work together was quite a challenge. And the communal tables. We have some really amazing stories of invasive species that people just flock to, and we didn't really know which ones would be appealing, but rats are the most popular animal in the nature lab. The other thing people come and look for are the black widows, and black widow spiders are native to Los Angeles, and everyone's terrified of them. But they're being replaced by brown widows. So we were able to show specimens, we were able to show that this was actually discovered by middle school kids, and that this is the kind of science that's going on all around Los Angeles, thanks to kids and adults and just regular people. Because we're in a giant city, virtually all of what is important about what's happening with biodiversity, except for famous cats you may know about P22, the very famous Los Angeles mountain lion. But except for the large carnivores, all of the day in and day out stuff that's interesting is going on in people's backyards, and scientists can't possibly get in there. So we need real people doing citizen science and collecting these objects, specimens. And again, little tiny experiences with big themes is really important. So our lessons learned. When you're working in a place like ours with so much deep content and so much interaction and so much back and forth between the audience and the deep content, you've got to get the content right. And if you try to design when you don't have the content organized, you have to go back and redesign. So that's essentially for us. And I know for a lot of people. The other thing is, if you have a problem, embrace it. It's not going to go away. And I've worked on a lot of projects where we would hide from the worst problem until the very end, and we would solve all the easy ones, and then you get almost to the end of the project, and you've still got this big thing that you haven't dealt with. We turned the horrific eyesore of an executive elevator shaft into what we call the hub. We just said, we have to use it. It's got to be turned into something really big, and it's got to be used on 3 sides. They have to be different. And we put a social media sourced video of 60 minutes of wildlife seen captured all around greater Los Angeles there. People sit there. It really did become the hub. And testing. Sometimes we would think we have to be done. We just have to build this. But really every single time, if we didn't test it again, we were sorry and we had to rip it out and go build it again. The next thing, of course, is just to honor the team. And I want to mention Technomedia, who hasn't been mentioned yet here, and I know you guys are here, so thank you. But there really was a cast of many, many, many freelancers, companies, people that we hired on for the exhibit, and it was just an incredible story. This is a project that changes us. It didn't change us the way working on 9/11 would change you, but Patrick Gallagher, who came obviously not from Los Angeles, after we did a big charrette, the next time he came, he said, I was looking at that freeway off-ramp and wondering about the wildlife that was there. People who didn't know Los Angeles, who think LA is some kind of a wasteland, changed their mind about it. Jennifer was one of the spider haters in the group. And by halfway through the project, she came in and proudly showed us a picture of a spider that she had seen on her entryway and not killed it because she was... And our curators started learning about what visitors actually don't know. People who do this work take for granted that it's important, and they cannot imagine that other people don't know that it's important. So bridging that gap is always really important. I think we hope that we are empowering people to think about the Los Angeles that they want in the future. I hope that you will all come visit. We hope that we are empowering ourselves as museums to think not just about natural history and the past, but about the future and about how we know we're studying that, but it's all of ours to shape. And places like this are meant to, if they hit their target, they're meant to get people thinking about what is the urban landscape that we want in 10, 20, and 50 years, especially with climate change. How are we going to manage our city for our future? Thanks.
Do I see hands? Yes, I see Adam B.
Beautiful exhibit. And one of the things that's really striking about it are the graphics and text management, which is usually sort of the bane of museum exhibits. How did you wrangle the text into submission so there was just the right amount and not too much? Did you have rules? Did you sort of say no more than 100 words per thing? How did you get it down? It's really lovely.
Yeah, we definitely started way up and had outlines that, were 100 pages long, and then it was an iterative process. But we had a partner, the person that Karen mentioned, Kim Bear from KBBA, who's an information designer. She's got a really great sense of hierarchy and did, many, many, many content workshops with us, trying to kind of working with us to hone the content. And then it just became, well, what's important, because we didn't want to do too much. And we started to whittle, things down.
I think for everything we do, exhibits are essentially subtractive and iterative. And then sometimes you say, oh, I lopped off the heart, so I have to go back and get it. But what we're trying to do is extract the essence. And that's hard. That's the hard work, especially because the language that we get greeted with is jargon. But I think, yes, you definitely make rules about text length, and then you break them sometimes. But we certainly had rules and guidelines, and we had writers and interpretive planners and educators and every kind of ologist and other non-ologist that you could have in the museum field was on this project.
Yeah, and we actually tried to do a lot more annotation and a lot more visually, like through the illustrations. So I was like less blocks of text. Could we do it somewhat way else? And then we would try to do that, and if it didn't work, we might go back. But it was definitely a balance between those two things.
How did this project start, and who paid for it?
The project started, it was part of a $135 million capital project at the Natural History Museum that was completed 5 years, that was completed in 2013. It included a seismic retrofit and huge work on our original 100-year-old 1913 building, brick building in the middle of Los Angeles. Needed some pretty high-tech work, and that was run by Don Webb of Cordell Corporation and the construction folks that also worked closely with us. And we had to move out of kind of a third of the museum. So the other half of that, which we were responsible for, was the exhibits. And we have had a hands-on discovery center since the early 80s. We were one of the first places that had ever had it. And we said, we got to reinvent the concept. It's time for a new kind of hands-on place. And then, kind of in the middle of the project, we had thrown $7 million into the project to say, we got to do something with the front of the building. We got to do some kind of something. And as it became evident as we went along that our work, our research in nature, and the future of Los Angeles, with all the questions about LA and infill and open space and all that kind of stuff, we were right in there on the research side and the behind the scenes side, and our visitors cared about it. So we created a garden, a 3.5-acre garden. Also, the whole not enough access to nature. That especially for urban kids, we have in Los Angeles, we have kids that live near the museum, and we're the only museum they come to, and they haven't even been to the ocean or the Santa Monica Mountains. So we wanted to create a nature experience, and once we created that, we didn't want to put a bunch of signs there. So we said, we've got to do our interpretive side inside. So we did away with the Discovery Center idea, and we said, we're going to make a nature lab. And we don't know what it's going to be, but we know it's got to do this. And, after kind of obsessing about it, we finally said, okay, we're going to start. And 2 years later, we had to open it.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
In your careers, how have you seen the ages or types of visitors change at all? And where do you see museums, place in the world now that we have access to so much knowledge through computers and our phones and other technology?
What a great question. Well, one of the things that we've got going, many things. It's funny you ask that now, because our museum is always asking that question. In fact, last Friday, 60 of us did a retreat to look at our museum and the digital world in the next 5 and 10 years. We have something great going for us, which is that audiences are actually more sophisticated about what's real and what's not. And you put a 65 million year old dinosaur in front of them, skeleton, and they know the difference between that and a virtual one. So I think that the real is more important than ever, but you can't just put it out there. So you've got to make it relevant. You've got to make it interesting, and you've got to provide ways in. So I think museums as third spaces is a big thing, with people gathering for social reasons and things like that. And we know that people do not come to our museum. They come because their 3-year-old wants to see dinosaurs, absolutely. But generally, what they really do is they come for social reasons. They come to bring their 3-year-old. They come to have a family day. They come to to do things together. And so I think our job is to balance the desire for interactivity with the desire for genuine social stuff, with the desire to touch the real. Also, natural history museums, remarkably, still have the public's faith. So we do a lot of showing of how we know what we know, how the scientists are actually discovering what they're discovering, and what the evidence is, and putting that evidence out for people. So for natural history museums, at least, I think we have an important, and if we play our cards right, if we are responsive enough to our visitors' needs, we can have a growing role. But we have to pay close attention. Zoos had to do that in the 70s. They had to go from being a showcase to being about conservation, and now they maybe have to rethink even that again. Natural history museums haven't even gone through that process in the 70s until the last 10 years. Recognizing that we've got to talk about things in ways that are relevant to people that have to do with the future of the earth.
Thank you very much, Karen and Jennifer.